The unusual Babysitter Orion Station 7 floated like a silent city between the stars, a place where humans and dozens of alien species lived and worked side by side under a fragile treaty. Lyra stood on one of the transparent walkways, her slender arms folded neatly against her silver-gray tunic as she watched streams of travelers passing beneath her. She had been trained for many duties in the Vayaran Federation, but none of them had prepared her for this new assignment: babysitting. To her people, children were kept under constant supervision by automated caretakers, and the idea of physically watching over one was almost strange. Yet here she was, summoned by Commander Holt himself, a human security officer, to care for his 7-year-old son Eli while he attended a critical meeting. Lyra repeated the information from her briefing. In her mind, human children were known to be fragile and prone to sudden emotional surges. They lacked the layered patience of Vayaran offspring and were easily distracted by trivialities. She expected a quiet shift, perhaps keeping the child occupied with simple holographic puzzles, feeding him nutritional supplements, and returning him safely when his father came back. That was the plan, at least. When the door slid open, she stepped into the Hope family quarters and saw Eli for the first time. A small human, thin and restless, with untidy brown hair and bright green eyes that glimmered with an energy Lyra could not name. He sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by scattered toy drones, his fingers moving rapidly as he assembled and disassembled one of them with surprising speed. He glanced up at her, blinking once, and then without hesitation he said, "Are you the babysitter?" Lyra nodded, adjusting her translator so her words came through smoothly. "Yes, Eli. I will be looking after you until your father returns." For a moment he studied her silently, his gaze scanning her 4 delicate arms, her faintly glowing silver skin, and the softly shifting patterns around her neck ridges. Then he grinned. "You look like a jellyfish," he announced cheerfully. "Can I call you Squishy?" Before Lyra could respond, her translator buzzed softly, replaying the translated phrase, and she froze. Human children were supposed to be polite, but Eli seemed to enjoy breaking expectations. "You may not," she said carefully, but Eli only smirked and returned to his toy, whispering Squishy under his breath. She tried to remain composed. Vayarans valued control above all else, and she would not let herself be unsettled by a small human. She moved closer and crouched, watching his rapid work. To her surprise, the drone he had been tinkering with suddenly rose into the air and hovered, its lights flashing in a sequence that seemed almost intentional. Lyra frowned, leaning closer to examine the programming embedded in the drone's panel. It had been rewritten. Not by any professional system, but manually. And Eli had done it in less than 10 minutes. "Where did you learn to do that?" She asked, genuinely curious now. Eli shrugged without looking up. "I like breaking things to see how they work. Then I make them better." That simple statement lingered in her mind longer than she expected. Human children were not supposed to manipulate alien tech this easily. Yet here was one doing exactly that. She reminded herself to log this observation later, but for now, she decided to keep him distracted with something safer. "Perhaps," she said, gesturing with one elegant hand, "we should begin the educational module. I have games designed to improve your memory and pattern recognition." Eli sighed dramatically, clearly unimpressed. "I already beat the memory games. Boring." Lyra tilted her head, unused to being dismissed so easily. "Then perhaps we can." A soft vibration hummed beneath her feet, so subtle she might have missed it if her species were less sensitive to energy fluctuations. Her upper arms instinctively tightened against her body. That had come from the lower levels of the station. She glanced down at her personal console, scanning for system reports. But before she could find anything, Eli suddenly stood, his expression strangely alert. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. She blinked, unsettled. You felt it too? He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing toward the door. Something woke up. Lyra straightened, unsettled by his certainty. Nothing woke up, it was just a systems adjustment. No, he said firmly, already stepping past her. I know where it came from. Before she could protest, Eli darted out of the quarters, moving with surprising speed for someone so small. Lyra swore softly in Vayoran and hurried after him, her longer strides allowing her to keep up as he navigated the twisting walkways with an ease that suggested he had explored far more than his father would approve of. Eli, return to the quarters. At once, she ordered, but he ignored her completely. After several minutes, he stopped in front of a massive security door deep within an isolated sector. Its surface gleamed with layered seals, covered in alien symbols and high-level warning markings. Lyra froze, instantly recognizing the restricted zone. According to her briefing, this area was off-limits even to most security personnel. Behind that door lay experimental research facilities that humans had inherited from the Federation, including volatile energy cores too. Dangerous for untrained staff to handle. Ela stood motionless, staring at the door as if listening to something. She could not hear. You shouldn't be here, Lyra said softly, lowering her voice instinctively even though no one else was nearby. This sector is forbidden. I can hear them, Eli whispered, without looking at her. Her frill ridges stiffened. Hear who? The voices, he said simply. They're calling for help. Lyra hesitated. There are no voices, Eli. There's no one inside. That area is locked for safety. But Eli turned his head, finally meeting her gaze, and there was no doubt in his eyes. It's not empty. Something's alive in there. Before she could respond, the station's eye chimed softly from an overhead panel, its neutral tone carrying an edge she rarely heard. Warning. Containment breach potential detected. Restricted Sector 12 under elevated surveillance. Unauthorized personnel, please vacate immediately. The panels above them flashed a dull red, baiting the corridor. In muted alarm light, Lyra's lower hands tightened around Eli's shoulders. We must leave, now. But Eli didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the sealed door, and she could see something else flicker across his expression, recognition, as though whatever was inside was already speaking directly to him. This was not going to be an ordinary babysitting assignment. Lyra had come expecting fragility, quiet puzzles, and an uneventful watch. Instead, she was standing beside a human child who claimed to hear the whispers of something sealed deep within Orion Station's forbidden sector. And judging by the alarms now pulsing through the air, whatever lay beyond that door was waking up, and Eli was somehow connected to it. The restricted door asterisk. The corridor around the restricted sector felt different from the rest of Orion Station. It was quieter here, almost too quiet, as though the air itself held its breath. Lyra's frill ridges tightened with unease as she stood near the massive sealed door, the red warning lights casting shifting shadows across her silver skin. The low hum beneath her feet had grown faintly stronger, like something deep inside the station was stirring after a long silence. Eli stood motionless before the towering door, his small figure dwarfed by the heavy metallic surface that stretched high above them. His green eyes reflected the pulsing lights, and he seemed utterly unafraid. For someone so young, he looked far too calm for a place like this. Lyra crouched slightly, lowering herself to his height, her four slender arms folding neatly as she tried to keep her voice steady. Eli, we cannot stay here. This area is not safe for humans or Vayrans. Your father would not allow it, and neither will I. We must return to your quarters. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pressed his small hand against the door, as though testing its vibrations. After a moment, he spoke in a quiet voice that made her frill ridges prickle. It's talking, he whispered. Lyra frowned, glancing instinctively toward the nearest surveillance panel. The station AI had fallen silent, but she could feel its presence watching them. "Nothing here talks, Eli," she said softly. "It is just machines behind this door, nothing more." He shook his head slowly, still keeping his hand on the cool metal surface. "It's not a machine. It's alive. I can hear it calling me." Her first instinct was disbelief, but the hum beneath her feet suddenly grew stronger, more rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Her Vayoran senses were finely tuned to energy fluctuations, and whatever lay behind this door was radiating power. Now faint but undeniable. She hesitated, conflicted between instinct and training. The child believed something alive was trapped inside. Could he truly sense something she couldn't? A deep vibration rumbled through the corridor, and for a brief moment, the lights above them dimmed before stabilizing again. Lyra tightened her grip on Eli's shoulder with two of her lower hands. "We are leaving," she said firmly, guiding him backward. But Eli resisted, his small body surprisingly strong for his size. "We can't leave it," he said, his voice filled with an intensity that startled her. "It's scared." Before she could respond, the station AI's neutral voice echoed through the corridor again, louder this time. "Warning. Containment. Field stability reduced by 12%. Sector 12 is under high security lockdown. Unauthorized presence detected." Small defense drones detached from hidden alcoves in the ceiling, hovering silently as their sensors swept the area. Lyra instinctively placed herself between Eli and the nearest drone, lifting one upper arm to identify herself. "Lyra, registered. Caretaker, authorization code Delta 47, she declared clearly, hoping her status as Eli's guardian would prevent an automated response. The drones paused for a moment, scanning her biosignature, then retreated slightly, holding their position. But they did not fully deactivate, and their lights remained trained on Eli as though the child himself were a potential threat. Lyra leaned closer to him, her voice low but urgent. "Eli, listen to me carefully. If these drones mark you as unauthorized, they will not hesitate to act. We must return now." He finally turned to her then, his green eyes wide and bright, but there was no fear in them. "I know how to open it," he said, as though revealing a simple fact. Lyra blinked, momentarily stunned by his words. "You cannot possibly, before." She finished. Eli reached into his pocket and produced a small toy scanner. It was an old piece of human tech repurposed for games, a harmless device meant to simulate access codes for children's puzzles. But he had modified it somehow, attaching tiny wires and a glowing crystal chip she recognized as a Vayoran interface node. She had seen him tinkering with one of his drones earlier, but she hadn't realized what he had been creating. He crouched down by the control panel next to the sealed door and pressed the scanner against it. The panel lit up faintly, symbols cascading across its surface in alien script, shifting far too fast for most humans to follow. But Eli's small fingers danced over the interface without hesitation, tapping specific sequences, bypassing prompts, and ignoring the AIS repeated warnings. "Unauthorized override attempt detected." The AI announced sharply, but Eli continued working as though he didn't hear it. Lyra crouched beside him, trying to stop his hands, but the child pulled back quickly. "Wait," he whispered urgently. "I can hear it better now. It's showing me which ones to press." She stared at him, confusion swirling with dread. "Something inside is telling you how to open the door?" He nodded once without looking up. "It doesn't want to hurt anyone. It's trapped." The hum beneath them intensified suddenly, and the panel emitted a soft tone as several of the locks disengaged with a deep mechanical clank. One after another, the security seals glowed red, then shifted to a dull green. Lyra's instincts screamed at her to pull him away and call for Commander Holt immediately. But before she could act, the AI cut in again, its voice carrying a strange edge she hadn't heard before. Warning: unknown cognitive interface detected. Human neural frequencies interacting with containment field. Initiating emergency scan. She understood then what was happening. The system had detected something unusual in Eli's brain activity. Something connecting directly to the core behind the door. Somehow, this child's mind could link with the alien technology sealed inside. Her first training protocol told her to retreat and report this immediately. But her instincts told her something else entirely. Whatever lay beyond that door was unstable, and the station systems were struggling to contain it. If Eli could somehow communicate with it, they might need him more than anyone realized. Suddenly, the AI spoke again, its tone no longer calm but urgent. Critical warning. Containment field integrity at 81% and falling. All security personnel report to Sector 12. The alarms blared louder now, reverberating off the metal walls as distant footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Security teams were on their way. Lyra turned to Eli, lowering her voice but keeping it steady. "We need to go, now." But Eli stepped closer to the door, pressing his hand against it again. "It's not angry," he murmured softly, almost to himself. "It's scared. It doesn't like the field. It hurts." The lights above them flickered violently, and for a single heartbeat, Lyra thought she felt something pass through the air around her, a strange pulse, faint but undeniably alive. It wasn't imagination. Something was in there. Something powerful. Eli turned back to her, his expression calm despite the alarms. "We can help it," he said simply, as though the choice was obvious. Lyra hesitated, her mind torn between fear and duty. She had been hired to keep this child safe, but safety now seemed like an illusion. Something far greater was unfolding inside Orion Station, and somehow, impossibly, this small human child stood at the center of it. Behind them, the heavy sound of approaching boots echoed louder, and the sharp beams of security lights cut through the red glow. Commander Holt would arrive soon, and with him, orders to lock down everything, perhaps even to destroy whatever lay behind the door. Lyra glanced back at the sealed chamber, then at Eli, who waited patiently for her answer, as though knowing she would not walk away from this. Whatever was trapped inside had begun to stir, and she could no longer deny it. And she also knew, deep down, that the quiet little boy she had come to babysit was anything but ordinary. Secrets behind the door, the red alarms continued to flash across the corridor, painting Lyra's silver skin in alternating shades of warning as the low hum beneath her feet became stronger, vibrating through the metal floor like a living heartbeat. The heavy security door still stood between them and whatever was inside, but now several of the locks glowed green where Eli's improvised device had bypassed the coated layers. Lyra could feel the station trembling faintly, not from any structural fault, but from the energy radiating beyond the sealed chamber, and every instinct in her told her this place was dangerous. Yet when she looked at Eli, she saw no fear in his young face, only a quiet certainty that made her hesitate longer than she should have. The sound of boots pounding against the metallic walkway was growing louder with every passing second. Security. Teams were approaching fast, their weapons no doubt primed to deal with anything they couldn't control. And Lyra knew if they arrived before she understood what was happening, they might decide to neutralize the unknown threat entirely. Something deep in her chest stirred uneasily because she sensed that whatever waited beyond this door wasn't malicious, at least not yet, and Eli seemed somehow connected to it. She leaned closer to him, her frill ridges fluttering faintly. As she lowered her voice, Eli listened carefully. "If we open this door without authorization, the station will treat us as intruders. Your father will be furious, and security could take drastic measures. You must tell me why you are so sure. Something alive is inside. Eli didn't take his eyes off the control panel, his small fingers pausing above the interface. "Because it told me," he said softly. Lyra stared at him, struggling to process his words. "Told you? How?" He touched his temple lightly. "I can hear it. Not like talking, more like feelings. It's scared. It doesn't like being trapped. It feels wrong here." She hesitated, torn between disbelief and the evidence around her. Vayrans had advanced senses for energy, but even she couldn't hear what this human child claimed to feel. Yet his certainty was unshakable, and when she extended her perception through the faint hum of the chamber, she thought she sensed something too, an odd, pulsing rhythm that wasn't mechanical, as though the energy itself had awareness. AI's voice interrupted her thoughts, sharper now than before. "Critical status update. Containment field integrity reduced to 73%. Unauthorized neural interference detected. Warning, unstable core resonance increasing." Lyra's eyes widened slightly. Neural interference. That had to be Eli, somehow. This small human's mind was interacting with a system that was designed to resist any foreign influence. It made no sense, but the readings didn't lie out suddenly. The door panel lit up brighter, and a cascade of alien symbols rolled rapidly across its interface. Eli tapped 3 in quick succession without hesitation, then leaned closer as though listening to instructions only he could hear. With a deep mechanical groan, the last lot disengaged. Lyra caught his wrist before he could push the door. "Eli, stop," she said firmly. "You do not know what is inside. If you open this without care, you could unleash something the Federation locked away for a reason." Eli turned his gaze up to her, calm and steady. "It's not angry," he said softly. "It's lonely." The corridor behind them filled with approaching footsteps, shouting voices, and the sharp hum of charged plasma rifles. They were running out of time. Before Lyra could decide what to do, the heavy door shuddered and began to slide open on its own, releasing a slow rush of cold, pressurized air. A dim blue light spilled from the chamber beyond, bathing them both in its glow. Lyra's upper hands instinctively pulled Eli closer as they stepped cautiously inside. The room was vast and circular, lined with towering consoles and inactive holographic displays, but at its center floated a massive crystalline structure suspended within a web of containment fields. It pulsed faintly with blue and white light, each surge radiating waves of energy that prickled against Lyra's sensitive skin. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, a core of unknown origin unlike anything she had seen before. Eli broke free of her hold and stepped toward it slowly, his small figure dwarfed by the glowing monolith. Lyra reached out instinctively, but stopped when she realized the containment fields, which should have been impenetrable, had weakened so much that strands of light were spilling through the gaps like mist. "Eli, do not go closer," she said sharply, moving beside him. "It's okay," he whispered, not looking at her. "It knows me." Lyra frowned. "How can it know you?" "Because it feels like me," he said simply. "It doesn't like being trapped. It just wants to breathe." The crystalline core pulsed again, and for a moment, Lyra thought she heard something faint, not a sound, not words, but an impression, a fleeting sense of longing that brushed against her thoughts before fading away. Her breath caught, realization dawning that Eli might not be imagining this at all. Suddenly, the AI's voice thundered through the room. "Emergency override engaged. All personnel evacuate Sector 12 immediately. Core resonance levels critical. Containment breach imminent." Panels around them hissed as secondary barriers began to deploy, but Eli raised his hands instinctively, and the energy spilling from the core seemed to hesitate, almost responding to him. The glowing streams shifted, twisting around him harmlessly instead of pushing outward. Lyra froze, watching with wide eyes. The system's energy signature had been chaotic moments ago, unstable and dangerous. yet the presence of this small human seemed to bring a strange balance to it. Eli stepped closer still until he stood directly beneath the floating core, his green eyes reflecting its light as if he had been born for this moment. Outside the chamber, security shouted orders, and the sound of boots striking metal rang louder, but Lyra barely noticed. Something extraordinary was unfolding right before her eyes. "Eli," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing?" He smiled faintly, not breaking his gaze from the core. "Listening." The crystalline monolith flared suddenly, sending a soft wave of energy through the chamber. Consoles flickered back to life for the first time in decades, displaying complex alien patterns that neither Lyra nor the station AI could immediately decode. The AI's voice crackled, almost sounding confused. "Unknown synchronization detected. Neural link forming. Unregistered human subject. Stabilizing core." Lyra took a cautious step forward, her lower arms tightening nervously. "Stabilizing it? How?" She murmured. Eli placed his palm gently against one of the faintly glowing strands of energy, and instead of being repelled or burned, he seemed to merge with its light. The erratic pulses slowed, settling into a steady rhythm, and the threatening vibrations beneath their feet began to ease. For the first time since they arrived, the room felt calm. Lyra stared at him in silent awe, realizing that this human child had done what no VRN engineer, no Federation scientist, and no automated failsafe could accomplish. He had communicated with an alien energy source and brought it back from the brink of instability. But before relief could settle, the door behind them slammed open, and several armed security officers poured into the chamber, Commander Holt at their lead. His expression shifted instantly from anger to confusion as he took in the sight before him. His son standing inches from a dangerous containment core, glowing faintly in its reflected light. "Eli," he shouted, his voice sharp with fear. "Step away from that thing right now." Eli turned to look at his father, calm and steady despite the chaos around him. "It's okay, Dad," he said softly. "It's not dangerous anymore." Lyra glanced between them, her thoughts racing. She had come expecting nothing more than a routine babysitting task, but instead she was witnessing something far greater, something that could change everything the Federation thought it understood about humanity. The AI spoke again, quieter this time, as though uncertain. Neural link stabilized. Containment field restored. Subject synchronization confirmed. The crystalline core pulsed once more, softer now, as though it had finally settled into harmony. And standing at the center of it all was a 7-year-old. Human child. The child who commands energy, the crystalline core, floated silently at the center of the chamber, its soft blue glow pulsing like the slow breath of something alive. The alarms that had once blared furiously now faded into the distance, replaced by a low steady hum that seemed to resonate in the air around them. Lyra stood frozen near the entrance, her 4 slender arms tense and ready, as though her instincts were warning her that they were standing on the edge of something neither she nor the station was prepared to face. Eli remained beneath the hovering monolith, his small hand still resting against one of the faint light streams drifting from its surface. His green eyes reflected the swirling energy like twin mirrors of its glow. Commander Holt, standing behind Lyra, had his weapon drawn but hesitated, his instincts battling between his training and his need to protect his son. Several security officers stood close by, their rifles raised, waiting for orders, but no one dared to move forward. "Eli, step back right now," Commander Holt said sharply, his voice shaking slightly despite his usual controlled tone. "That thing isn't safe. You don't know what it can do to you." The boy turned his head just enough to glance at his father, calm and composed in a way no 7-year-old should be. "It's not going to hurt me," he said softly, his voice carrying a strange certainty. "It knows me." Lyra moved closer, lowering her voice so only the commander could hear. He isn't lying. The core has stabilized since he touched it. I don't know how, but somehow his neural patterns are compatible. Commander Holt's brow furrowed as his grip tightened on his weapon. Compatible? That's a containment class anomaly, Lyra. No one should be anywhere near it, especially not him. Before Lyra could respond, the station AI interrupted, its voice unusually hesitant, as though analyzing a phenomenon it didn't fully understand. Core resonance stabilized at 79%. Neural link confirmed. Human subject Eli Holt is acting as a synchronization anchor. Removing the subject may destabilize the containment field. A ripple of confusion swept through the room. The security officers exchanged uncertain glances, waiting for orders. Holt's jaw clenched as he slowly lowered his weapon, but did not holster it. "What do you mean by anchor?" he asked the AI. "Analysis incomplete," the AI replied. Preliminary conclusion. Human neural adaptability uniquely matches unidentified energy patterns. Subject maintains harmonic stability between core emissions and containment architecture. Lyra translated quietly for the commander, though he hardly needed her words. Ellie was holding the core together, somehow acting as the living bridge between a dangerous alien power source and the fragile systems around it. But while the core appeared calm, Lyra sensed undercurrents of instability within its energy. It was like watching a storm behind a glass wall, waiting for a single crack to unleash it. Eli, meanwhile, seemed perfectly at ease, as though the light flowing around him was a natural extension of himself. He tilted his head slightly, his voice soft and thoughtful. "It doesn't like being trapped here," he said slowly. "It wants to go home." Commander Holt stepped forward instinctively, his voice rising. "Eli, stop talking to it. You don't know what you're messing with." But Eli only closed his eyes, his small body relaxing, as if he were listening to something none of them could hear. The core pulsed brighter in response, and faint strands of energy stretched toward him, wrapping gently around his arms like streams of living light. Lyra felt her frill ridges flare involuntarily. "Commander," she whispered urgently, "I think the core is bonding to him." Before Holt could reply, one of the officers shouted from the back, "Power fluctuations across decks 5 through 8. The core's pulling energy from the station's grid." The lights above them flickered wildly, and the AI's voice returned with renewed urgency. "Warning! Containment stability dropping. Human neural anchor insufficient to hold power equilibrium. Additional energy pathways required." Lyra's mind raced. The core had recognized Eli's unique connection, but his small mind wasn't enough to manage the sheer force of what it contained. If the station systems collapsed, the release of energy could tear Orion Station apart. Suddenly, Eli spoke again, his voice calm but strained. "I can't do it alone," he whispered. "It wants me to help it find balance, but the station's fighting back." Lyra stepped closer, her lower hands reaching out carefully. "Eli, listen to me. You have to slow down. Whatever it's asking you to do, you can't give it everything at once. If you overload, it can hurt you." The boy turned his gaze toward her, and for the first time, she saw uncertainty in his eyes. "I don't think it wants to hurt anyone," he said quietly. "But it doesn't understand what this place is. It's scared." Behind them, security officers shifted nervously, their weapons still raised though none dared to fire. "Commander." Holt's breathing grew heavy as he glanced between his son and the floating core, torn between his fear as a father and his duty as a soldier. The eye interjected once more, but its usual precision was breaking under incomplete data. Unknown. System synchronization occurring. Probability of full energy cascade, 42% and rising. Recommend immediate shutdown protocols. The commander's voice hardened, his decision forming. I initiate manual lockdown. Seal the chamber. Before the system could respond, Eli's small voice cut through the tension. If you shut it down, it'll die. Everyone froze at his words. Lyra's breath caught, her frill ridges curling tightly against her neck. Eli, she asked gently, how do you know that? He pointed to the pulsing core. Because it showed me, he said simply, as though that explained everything. It's not just energy. It's alive in its own way. And if you shut it down, it'll stop forever. The chamber filled with silence broken only by the low hum of the core. Commander Holt lowered his weapon fully now, his eyes locked on his son. His voice was quiet but heavy. Then what do we do? Eli glanced up at Lyra, his small face pale but steady. We help it breathe. Lyra hesitated only a moment before. Moving to the nearest console, her upper hands flying over alien symbols she had only studied during her training. The systems protested, alarms flashing warnings about restricted commands, but she ignored them, her other hand stabilizing Eli by the shoulders, guided partly by her knowledge and partly by Eli's strange instinctive understanding. They began rerouting energy from non-essential sectors to form a stable loop around the core, giving it controlled space to release its buildup without overwhelming the station. The air grew warmer as energy coursed through the room, faint sparks shimmering around them as though reality itself were trembling beneath invisible pressure. The core pulsed brighter now, its light cascading in waves across the chamber walls, until finally, after what felt like endless minutes, the hum began to soften into a steady, even rhythm. The IS voice returned at last, calmer than before. Containment field stabilized, core emissions normalized. Threat level reduced to secondary. Relief washed through Lyra, her four shoulders lowering as her tense muscles finally released. Commander Holt stepped forward slowly, kneeling to pull his son into his arms, his voice rough as he whispered, "Don't ever scare me like that again." Eli hugged him briefly but pulled away, glancing back at the crystalline structure. "It's okay now," he said softly. "But it's still lonely." Lyra watched him in silence, her thoughts tangled. She had come expecting a fragile human child, yet Eli had connected with something the most advanced systems in the Federation couldn't comprehend. She realized then that humanity was far more complex and far more extraordinary than her people had ever believed. But deep down, she also sensed this wasn't over. The core had bonded to Eli, and bonds like that were not easily broken. The awakening of the core, the station floated in silence, surrounded by the endless darkness of space. But inside the containment chamber, there was still a lingering tension in the air. The core's soft glow pulsed steadily now, no longer unstable. Yet everyone could feel that something deeper had shifted. It was not just an alien object anymore. It was aware, and through Eli, it had touched them in ways they could not explain. Lyra stood near the console, her four slender hands resting on the edge as she studied the new readings flowing across the holographic display. Every number told her the same impossible truth. The core had completely adapted to the station systems without triggering any damage. More shocking was that its energy signature had synchronized fully with Eli's neural patterns. The connection was no longer passive. It was active and constant. Commander Holt paced nearby, his boots echoing faintly on the metallic floor, his face caught between relief and worry. He kept glancing toward his son, who now sat cross-legged beneath the hovering monolith, watching. The streams of light swirled gently around him as though they were responding to his every unspoken thought. "Tell me the truth, Lyra," the commander said at last, his voice low. "Is he safe?" Lyra hesitated, her frill ridges twitching in quiet uncertainty. "I believe so," she answered carefully. "The core is no longer destabilizing. In fact, Eli is acting as its primary interface now. I don't sense any harm being done to him, but... She paused, her lower hands curling slightly. He is different. This kind of neural bonding is beyond anything the Federation has ever recorded. We don't know what lasting effects it may have. Commander Holt's jaw tightened, his fatherly instincts screaming against leaving his son anywhere near the thing. Yet he could see with his own eyes that Eli was not in pain. On the contrary, the boy seemed calmer than ever, as though sitting in the heart of a storm and feeling perfectly safe. Suddenly, Eli opened his eyes and spoke softly, his voice carrying an eerie weight far beyond his years. "It's showing. Me things," he said. Lyra stepped closer, lowering herself to his level. "What kind of things, Eli?" The boy tilted his head slightly, his green eyes reflecting the shimmering light. "Places. Stars I've never seen before. Worlds that aren't like ours. It says it came from somewhere far away, a place where energy lives the way we do. It was brought here by accident when its home collapsed, and it's been trapped ever since." One of the security officers muttered under his breath, "He's talking like it's alive." Lyra turned to face him, her voice firm. "It is. We can no longer treat it as just technology. It's intelligent, even if not in a way we fully understand." Eli stood up slowly, his small hands brushing against the streams of light as though they were made of silk. "It's afraid," he whispered. "It thought we were trying to destroy it. That's why it reacted when we tried to shut it down." "Commander." Holt stepped forward, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Then tell it we're not going to hurt it," he said softly. Eli nodded, closing his eyes. The chamber fell silent, the air humming faintly as the streams of light seemed to pause mid-flow. After a moment, the glow of the core deepened to a soft golden hue, and a faint warmth spread through the room like the gentle rays of a hidden sun. Lyra's frills expanded in awe. "It understood you," she said breathlessly. Eli opened his eyes again, smiling faintly. "It trusts us now." But as relief settled over the group, the station AI interrupted, its tone sharper than before. "Alert. External scans detect unidentified energy signatures approaching from Vector 987. Estimated arrival in 4 minutes. The commander snapped to attention immediately. "Show me," he ordered. A holographic projection formed above the console, displaying several massive structures moving toward Orion Station. Their shapes were unlike any ship in Federation records, resembling vast arcs of translucent material that glimmered faintly against the void. Their signatures matched nothing in any database. Lyra's voice tightened. "Those aren't Federation ships. And they're not pirates. Their energy is identical to the core's." Ailey stepped forward instinctively, his small frame dwarfed by the looming hologram. "They're looking for it," he said quietly. "They've been looking for it for a long time." The commander glanced down at his son. "How do you know?" "That? I can feel it," Eli answered simply. "The core is calling to them. It wants to go home." The IS voice chimed again, its algorithm struggling to predict the unknown. "Unidentified vessels are charging energy fields. Probability of defensive measures activating, 73%. Commander Holt swore under his breath. "If they think we're holding one of their own hostage, this station won't survive a fight." Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in her voice. "We need to give it back." There was silence in the chamber, the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone. Holt's gaze shifted from the holographic display to his son, and finally to the softly glowing core. Every instinct as a soldier told him not to hand over something so powerful to an unknown species. But every instinct as a father told him to trust the boy who had already done the impossible. "Eli," he said carefully, kneeling to meet his son's eyes. "Can you communicate with them?" Can you show them we mean no harm? The boy nodded slowly. I can try. Lyra guided Eli closer to the core. The streams of light wrapped gently around his small frame, pulsing faintly as though syncing with his heartbeat. The chamber seemed to fade away as his mind reached outward, carried on waves of energy no human technology could mimic. Outside, the alien vessels slowed, their shimmering forms surrounding Orion Station like silent sentinels. No weapons fired, no threats were spoken. Instead, a faint vibration rippled through the station. A soundless resonance felt rather than heard. Eli's lips moved, though no sound came from him. He was no longer speaking with words, but with thoughts and emotions carried directly into the vast network of energy surrounding them. He showed them trust. He showed them safety. He showed them that the core was unharmed. And then, slowly, the vessels responded. The energy around the station shifted, softening, wrapping Orion Station in a cocoon of calm. The streams of light around the core brightened, and Eli's eyes opened once more. They're here to take it home, he said quietly. The commander exhaled a long, slow breath, his shoulders finally relaxing. Then let's not stand in there. Way. The engineers opened the containment chamber, and the core drifted gently upward, its golden glow shining brighter than ever before. Ayla reached out one last time, his fingers brushing against the light. It says thank you, he whispered. Softly. The core passed through the chamber walls as though they were nothing, carried on currents of energy toward the waiting vessels. The moment it merged with them, a blinding wave of light swept across the station, but there was no heat, no pain, only a profound sense of peace, as though the universe itself had sighed in relief. The vessels turned and vanished into the darkness, their forms dissolving into streams of light until there was nothing left but the endless quiet of space. Inside the chamber, no one spoke for several long moments. Finally, Lyra looked down at Eli, her expression filled with something between awe and respect. I was sent here to watch over you, she said softly, but I think it's you who has been teaching me. Eli smiled faintly, glancing back at the empty space where the core had been. It wasn't scary, he said simply. It just wanted to go home. Commander Holt knelt beside him, pulling him into a quiet embrace. And you helped it find the way, he whispered. Far away, beyond the reach of human eyes, a new chapter of understanding had begun between two very different forms of life. And though the station returned to its routines, everyone who had stood in that chamber that day knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. The moment a human child spoke to the stars and was heard. The end.